Mother dog cries for help to save her puppy. Man's reaction will leave you speechless. What happens when a desperate mother dog seeks human help? The shocking twist in this rescue story will leave you in tears. Like, share, and let us know where you're watching from. The cold stung David Brooks's skin as he zipped up his tent in the fading mountain light. 3 months since he'd spoken to another human being. 3 months of solitude in these remote hills, with only his camera for company. Just the way he wanted it. A low whimper cut through the silence. David froze, his hand still on the zipper. There it was again. A soft, desperate sound that made the hair on his neck stand up. He reached for his flashlight, sweeping the beam across the clearing around his campsite. 2 reflective eyes caught the light at the edge of the trees, wild, urgent, and fixed directly on him. "Get out of here," he muttered, waving his hand dismissively. He wasn't in the mood for company, even the 4-legged kind. The mountains were supposed to be his escape, his refuge from a world he no longer wanted any part of. The last thing he needed was some stray animal seeking handouts. But as the creature stepped into the clearing, David's irritation gave way to concern. It was a dog, a large female with the distinct markings of a German Shepherd mix and the ice-blue eyes of a husky. Her fur was matted with dirt and what looked disturbingly like dried blood. One front paw was held slightly off the ground, and her sides heaved with each labored breath. This wasn't just a stray. Something was wrong. "Easy there," David said, his voice softer now. He crouched down, extending his hand cautiously. The dog approached him with a strange urgency, not the wariness he'd expect from a feral animal. She pressed her nose into his palm, then immediately pulled back, whining louder. She took 3 steps toward the tree line, then turned back to look at him, her eyes reflecting something that sent a chill through his body. Desperation. Pure, raw desperation. "I'm not following you," David said firmly, as if the animal could understand him. "Whatever's out there, it's not my problem." The dog circled back, her movements becoming more frantic. She tugged at his sleeve with surprising gentleness, careful not to tear the fabric with her teeth. The moment he pulled away, she repeated the motion, more insistent this time. Thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm was moving in, the air heavy with the promise of rain. All the more reason to stay put. All the more reason to ignore whatever drama this animal was trying to drag him into. "Look, I can't help you," he said, turning back toward his tent. "I'm done helping. I'm done with all of it." The images flashed unbidden in his mind. The aftermath of the avalanche, his camera capturing the devastation, the faces of the families when they realized their loved ones wouldn't be coming home, the accusations that followed, the media frenzy, the whispers that he'd been more concerned with getting the perfect shot than alerting authorities in time. They were wrong, but it didn't matter. Nothing he could say would bring those people back. So, he'd retreated here, to this remote corner of the wilderness, where his camera captured only birds and sunsets, where he didn't have to face another human being or their pain. The dog let out a sound that wasn't quite a bark, something between a howl and a cry. She lunged forward, grabbing his pant leg this time, tugging with unmistakable intent. "Jesus, what is wrong with you?" David snapped, pulling free. That's when he saw it, the fresh blood on her paws, smeared across the forest floor. Not old wounds. She was bleeding now, leaving crimson prints in the dirt as she paced. Against his better judgment, David grabbed his emergency pack and flashlight. "Fine," he muttered. "Show me what's so damn important." The dog didn't hesitate. The moment she realized he was following, she took off into the trees, glancing back every few seconds to ensure he was still behind her. The rain started, light at first, then heavier, drumming against the forest canopy. David followed the dog along an overgrown logging trail, his boots sliding on the increasingly muddy ground. Each time he slowed, the dog circled back, nudging him forward with increasing urgency. Something about this didn't feel right. This wasn't normal animal behavior. She wasn't just lost or hungry. She was leading him somewhere specific. The trail curved sharply downhill, toward a ravine that cut through the mountain. David's flashlight beam caught the edge of something unnatural, splintered wood, freshly broken, scattered across the trail. "Slow down," he called to the dog, but she ignored him, disappearing around a bend in the trail. When he caught up, she was standing at the edge of what had once been a small footbridge spanning a dried-up riverbed. Half of it had collapsed, leaving a jagged gap over a 15-foot drop. The dog paced at the edge, then scrambled down the steep bank into the riverbed below, disappearing into the shadows. "I'm not jumping down there," David called after her. He directed his flashlight into the darkness, scanning for a safer way down. The beam caught something small and motionless near a pile of debris. His heart sank. Now he understood. There, partially buried under fallen branches and mud, was a small puppy. Its fur was the same coloration as the mother's, but barely visible under layers of dirt. It wasn't moving. David's pulse quickened as he stared down at the motionless puppy. The rain fell harder now, turning the dried riverbed into slick mud. The mother dog whined urgently, pawing at the debris pinning her baby down. "Hold on," David called, searching for a safer way down than jumping. He spotted a cluster of exposed roots and rocks forming a natural, if precarious, path. He slung his pack securely over his shoulders and began to descend, one careful step at a time. The mother circled anxiously as he approached, her eyes never leaving her puppy. As David knelt beside the small body, he could see it was barely breathing, tiny, shallow movements of its chest, the only sign of life. "It's okay," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring the mother or himself. "Let me help." The puppy couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Its eyes weren't even fully open yet. David gently removed the branches and debris, revealing a small gash on the pup's hind leg. Not life-threatening, but concerning for something so young and fragile. "How did you even get down here?" he asked softly. As if in answer, the mother dog moved to a section of the collapsed riverbank and pawed at the dirt. David directed his flashlight toward the spot and noticed what looked like a small den carved into the side of the bank, a makeshift home. "You were living here," he realized. "The storm must have caused the collapse." The puppy let out a tiny whimper as David lifted it, cradling it against his chest. Its body was cold, dangerously cold. Hypothermia was setting in. He unzipped his jacket and tucked the tiny creature inside, against his body heat. "We need to get somewhere dry," he told the mother. "My camp isn't far." He took a step toward the bank, ready to climb back up, when a strange sensation stopped him. The ground beneath his feet felt wrong, hollow somehow. Each step made a subtle, echoing sound that seemed out of place. The mother dog sensed it too. She backed away, ears flat against her head. "What is it, girl?" David asked, freezing in place. The answer came with terrifying swiftness. A deep, ominous crack split the air. The ground beneath David's feet shifted, just an inch at first, then more dramatically. Wet soil crumbled away, revealing a dark void beneath. "No, no, no!" David lunged for solid ground, but it was too late. The earth gave way beneath him. He clutched the puppy tight against his chest as he fell, plummeting into darkness. His body slammed against something hard, dirt and rocks cascading around him. Pain exploded through his shoulder and left leg. For several seconds he couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just pain and darkness and the distant sound of the mother dog's frantic barking from somewhere above. David fumbled for his flashlight, amazed it hadn't broken in the fall. The beam revealed a cavernous space beneath the riverbed, some kind of underground cave system. Water dripped from the ceiling where his body had punched through. He took inventory of his injuries, bruised shoulder, twisted ankle, but nothing broken. The puppy miraculously seemed unharmed, still tucked safely inside his jacket. "It's okay," he whispered to the shivering bundle. "We're okay." But they weren't okay. They were trapped at least 15 feet below the surface, in a cave with no obvious exit. Above him, the hole he'd fallen through was far too high to reach, and the sides were too smooth to climb. "Hello?" he called up. "Can you hear me?" The mother's worried face appeared at the opening, her barking more frantic now. "I've got your baby," he called to her. "It's safe, but I need help." The absurdity of the situation struck him then. He was talking to a dog, asking for rescue from an animal. But what choice did he have? There was no cell service this far into the mountains. No one knew where he was. No one was coming to look for him. David carefully set the puppy down on his unzipped pack, creating a makeshift nest. Then he examined the cave more closely. It stretched in two directions, a narrow passage to his left and a wider opening to his right. Neither looked particularly inviting, but staying put wasn't an option. The puppy needed warmth and medical attention. He picked up the pack with the puppy inside and took a tentative step toward the wider passage. That's when his flashlight caught something unnatural nestled in the dirt. A frayed piece of rope, too perfectly cut to be anything but man-made. David bent to examine it. Not just rope, an old leash, half buried and rotting, but unmistakable. And beyond it, something that made his blood run cold. Scratch marks in the stone wall. Deep, desperate gouges that could only have been made by an animal trying to escape. A chill ran through David that had nothing to do with the damp cave. He traced his fingers over the scratch marks, feeling the desperation embedded in each groove. These weren't random. These were methodical, concentrated around what appeared to be an old metal ring fastened to the cave wall. "What the hell happened here?" he whispered. The puppy whimpered softly in his pack, pulling David from his dark thoughts. Whatever mysteries this cave held would have to wait. Right now, he needed to find a way out and get this tiny creature to safety. He shuffled deeper into the cavern, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The passage widened into what appeared to be a larger chamber. David's breath caught in his throat as the light illuminated the space. It wasn't a natural formation. Someone had been here. Someone had expanded this cave, reinforced it. Wooden support beams, now rotting and sagging, lined the walls. The ground had been leveled, the dirt packed down by what must have been years of foot traffic. Most disturbing of all were the remnants scattered throughout the chamber. Broken crates with rusted hinges, frayed ropes tied to metal stakes driven into the ground, and what appeared to be feeding troughs, long emptied and covered in a thick layer of dust. David's mind raced to make sense of it. This wasn't just a cave. It was a holding area, for animals, for dogs. "My God," he breathed, the realization hitting him with sickening force. This was a breeding operation. Not just any breeding operation, an illegal one. Hidden underground, away from prying eyes and animal welfare inspections. The kind of place where dogs were kept in darkness, forced to produce litter after litter, never seeing sunlight or feeling grass beneath their paws. The mother dog's desperation suddenly made terrible sense. She hadn't just been living in a den by the riverbed. She had escaped from here, and somehow, incredibly, she'd returned to save her puppy that had been left behind. A bone-deep anger rose in David's chest, momentarily overriding his fear. The puppy stirred in his pack, its tiny pink tongue darting out to lick his hand as he checked on it. "You're getting out of here," he promised the tiny creature. "Both of you are." A distant rumbling sound froze him in place. The cave's ceiling shifted slightly, releasing a shower of dirt and small rocks. The storm above was intensifying, and this underground prison was far from stable. David turned, looking for any possible exit. The chamber had 3 additional passages leading from it. One was partially collapsed, clearly impassable. The second was narrow, too narrow for a human to squeeze through, but the third looked promising, wider, with what appeared to be a slight upward slope. As he approached it, a sound from above made him look up. The mother dog was still at the opening he'd fallen through, but now she was dragging something with her teeth. A long, thick branch. "What are you doing?" David called up. The dog dropped the branch, letting it fall into the cave. It clattered against the ground, far too short to reach the opening, but David suddenly understood her intent. "You're trying to help," he said, amazed. "You're actually trying to help me climb out." It wouldn't work. The branch was barely 6 feet long, and the opening was at least 15 feet up. But the gesture left David speechless. This animal's intelligence was extraordinary. Another rumble shook the cave, more urgent this time. A large chunk of ceiling crashed down just feet from where David stood. "I need to move," he muttered. "This whole place could come down." He gathered up his pack with the puppy and headed for the sloping passage, his flashlight revealing more disturbing signs of the cave's former purpose. Food bags with faded labels, empty water bowls crusted with years of grime, and, worst of all, a small pile of bones tucked into a corner, too small to be anything but puppy remains. David swallowed the bile rising in his throat and pressed on. The passage curved upward, giving him hope, but after about 50 feet, it ended abruptly at a crude wooden door. The wood was swollen with moisture, the hinges rusted solid, but the door wasn't locked. With a powerful shove that sent pain lancing through his injured shoulder, David forced it open. Beyond the door lay another chamber, smaller than the first, but clearly serving a different purpose. Metal filing cabinets, toppled and rusted, spilled their contents across the dirt floor. Papers, photographs, what looked like ledgers. This had been an office of sorts, the administrative center of whatever hellish operation had been run here. David's photographer's eye couldn't help but document the scene mentally, cataloging the evidence of human cruelty. A half-collapsed desk held an ancient computer monitor, its screen shattered. Behind it, another door, this one steel with a heavy padlock. The padlock had long since rusted through, crumbling in David's hand as he pulled on it. The door groaned in protest as he pushed it open, revealing a steep set of stairs carved directly into the rock, leading upward. Yes, David breathed, relief flooding through him. An exit. He took the first step, but his injured ankle gave way, sending him crashing against the wall. Pain shot up his leg, and he bit back a cry. The puppy whimpered in response, sensing his distress. "It's okay," he soothed, adjusting the pack more securely. "We're getting out." As he steadied himself, his flashlight beam caught something glinting in the dirt, a small metal tag, half buried. David dug it out, wiping away the grime with his thumb. It was a kennel tag, with a number and a name etched into the metal. Property of Black Mountain Kennels, number 47. The name meant nothing to him, but the tag was relatively new, not decades old like most of the equipment in the cave, which meant another violent tremor shook the cave, more powerful than the last. The stairs shifted beneath his feet, and a deafening crack split the air as one of the support beams gave way. David didn't hesitate. Ignoring the pain in his ankle, he charged up the stairs, taking them two at a time, the precious cargo secured against his chest. Behind him, the chamber began to collapse, decades of secret horrors finally being reclaimed by the earth. The stairs ended at a trap door. David pushed with all his strength, praying it wasn't locked from the outside. It gave way suddenly, spilling him onto wet grass and blessed, glorious open air. Rain lashed David's face as he sprawled on the grass, gulping in the fresh air. The night sky was obscured by storm clouds, but compared to the suffocating darkness of the cave, it felt like stepping into daylight. He lay still for a moment, letting the rain wash away the cave dust and the horror of what he'd discovered. The puppy squirmed against his chest, making tiny sounds of distress. David unzipped his jacket to check on the small creature. It was still breathing, but weakly, its tiny body trembling with cold and shock. "We need to get you warm," he murmured. A familiar bark cut through the storm's noise. David looked up to see the mother dog racing toward them, her relief palpable in every line of her body. She reached the puppy first, frantically licking its face and body, whining softly. "She's alive," David told her, as if the animal could understand. "But she needs help, real help." He took stock of his surroundings. The trapdoor had led him to a small clearing in the forest, a good half-mile from where he'd first fallen through the riverbed. An old, dilapidated shed stood nearby, its roof half-collapsed, blending almost perfectly with the surrounding trees. It would have been easy to miss if you weren't looking for it, which, he realized, was exactly the point. This had been the entrance to the underground facility all along, carefully hidden, deliberately remote. David struggled to his feet, wincing as his injured ankle protested. The mother dog watched him intently, then turned and trotted a few steps toward a narrow path leading away from the shed, looking back expectantly. "You want to lead again?" David asked. "Last time didn't work out so well for me." The dog circled back, nudging his leg insistently. David sighed, checking his pack one more time. The puppy had stopped shivering quite so violently, nestled against the spare shirt he'd cushioned it with. But it was still dangerously weak. "All right, girl, one more time." He followed the mother dog through the forest, moving as quickly as his injured ankle would allow. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, but the ground was treacherous with mud and hidden roots. Twice he nearly fell, catching himself at the last moment. The dog seemed to understand his limitation, slowing her pace whenever the terrain grew especially difficult. She stayed close, occasionally circling back to check on the puppy before leading on again with surprising confidence. After about 20 minutes of difficult hiking, lights appeared through the trees, warm, golden lights that could only be man-made. Hope surged through David as they emerged from the forest onto a gravel road. At its end stood a small building with a glowing sign, Pine Ridge Veterinary Clinic. "Smart girl," David breathed, amazed. The mother dog wasn't just leading him to safety, she was leading him directly to help for her puppy. Either this was an incredible coincidence, or the animal possessed an intelligence that defied explanation. The clinic's lights were on despite the late hour, a single car parked outside. David limped the final 100 yards, the mother dog now racing ahead to scratch frantically at the door. A woman in scrubs appeared, confusion crossing her face as she took in the bizarre scene. A mud-covered man limping toward her clinic in the rain, a frantic dog dancing around his feet. "Please," David called. "I need help." She pushed the door open wider, concern replacing confusion. "Come in, quickly." The warmth of the clinic enveloped David as he stumbled inside, water and mud dripping onto the clean floor. The mother dog rushed in behind him, shaking herself vigorously. "I'm Eva Sinclair," the woman said, guiding him to an examination room. "What happened to you?" "It's not me," David said, carefully opening his pack. "It's this little one." Dr. Sinclair's professional demeanor took over instantly when she saw the puppy. She gently lifted the tiny creature, placing it on the examination table. "How long has it been like this?" she asked, her fingers moving expertly over the puppy's body, checking for injuries. "I don't know exactly. At least an hour, maybe longer." David quickly explained about finding the mother dog, the collapsed riverbed, and the puppy trapped in the debris. He left out the underground facility for now. It sounded too bizarre, too nightmarish to be believed without evidence. Dr. Sinclair worked with practiced efficiency, taking the puppy's temperature, administering fluids, wrapping it in warming blankets. The mother dog watched every move, her body tense but compliant, somehow understanding that this human was helping, not harming. "She's remarkably calm," Dr. Sinclair observed, nodding toward the mother. "Most dogs would be aggressive if a stranger was handling their puppy." "She led me here," David said. "She knew exactly where she was going." Dr. Sinclair glanced up, surprise evident in her expression. "That's unusual." "Everything about her is unusual," David replied, watching as the vet carefully cleaned the gash on the puppy's leg. As Dr. Sinclair worked, she turned the puppy gently, exposing its belly. She paused, frowning slightly. "What is it?" David asked. "This marking here." She pointed to a small, dark patch on the puppy's skin. "It's not natural coloration. It looks like..." "Like what?" "Like a tattoo," she finished, voice tight with disapproval. "A crude one, but definitely man-made." David leaned closer, squinting at the mark. It was small, easily mistaken for a birthmark if you weren't looking carefully. A simple number, 47. The same number that had been on the kennel tag in the cave. "Can I see the mother?" Dr. Sinclair asked suddenly. David nodded, though the request struck him as odd. The vet approached the mother dog, who allowed her to examine her ears with surprising patience. "Just as I thought," Dr. Sinclair said quietly. She pointed to a nearly invisible mark inside the dog's ear. Another tattoo, this one bearing a different number and a small symbol. "What does it mean?" David asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "It's a breeder's mark," she explained, her voice hardening. "Not a legal one. These are the kind used by puppy mills and illegal breeding operations. They track their stock this way." The disgust in her voice was evident as she spoke the word stock. David pulled the metal tag from his pocket, placing it on the examination table. "Like this?" Dr. Sinclair picked it up, her face paling as she read the inscription. "Black Mountain Kennels," she whispered. "My God." "You know them?" She nodded grimly. "They were shut down 5 years ago. One of the worst puppy mill cases in state history. Dozens of dogs were rescued, but the owner disappeared before he could be arrested." She looked at the mother dog with new understanding. She must have been one of the ones they never found. But if they were shut down 5 years ago? David let the implication hang in the air. Dr. Sinclair's face hardened. "Then this puppy shouldn't exist, and that tattoo shouldn't be fresh." She gently stroked the mother dog's head. "She didn't just escape from somewhere years ago. This is recent." A cold feeling settled in David's stomach. "The underground facility I found, it wasn't abandoned, not completely." "Underground facility?" Dr. Sinclair's eyes widened. David described what he'd discovered in the cave, the crates, the restraints, the makeshift office. As he spoke, Dr. Sinclair's expression grew increasingly troubled. "The authorities claimed they'd found all of Black Mountain's locations," she said, "but there were always rumors about a hidden breeding site, For their most valuable dogs, she looked at the mother. Shepherd Husky mixes are desirable. They sell for thousands. Blue eyes make them even more valuable. The puppy on the table stirred, making a tiny squeaking sound. Its eyes fluttered open, revealing the same striking blue as its mother's. "Is she going to be okay?" David asked. Dr. Sinclair nodded. "She's dehydrated and hypothermic, but I don't see any life-threatening injuries. With proper care, she should recover." She paused, studying David more carefully. "You're not looking so great yourself. Let me check that ankle while the warming fluids do their work." David hadn't even noticed how badly he was limping until she mentioned it. He sank gratefully into a chair, extending his leg as the vet quickly examined his swollen ankle. "Bad sprain, but not broken," she concluded. "You're lucky. That fall could have killed you." "The mother saved both of us," David said quietly. "She knew exactly what she was doing." While Dr. Sinclair wrapped his ankle, David's thoughts returned to the cave and the kennel tag. If Black Mountain Kennels was shut down years ago, who's running the operation now? "That's what troubles me," Dr. Sinclair replied. "The owner, James Mercer, vanished with much of their documentation and breeding records. The authorities suspected he had partners, but could never prove it." She finished bandaging David's ankle and sat back. "Some of the rescued dogs were adopted locally. I treated a few of them. The trauma they suffered—" She shook her head, unable to finish the thought. The mother dog had settled on the floor beside the examination table, her eyes never leaving her puppy. There was an intelligence in those eyes that continued to amaze David, an awareness that went beyond normal animal instinct. "I should call the sheriff," Dr. Sinclair said, reaching for her phone. "If there's an active illegal breeding operation out there, they need to know." David nodded, though something made him uneasy. "Do you have any old records about Black Mountain? Anything that might help us understand what we're dealing with?" "I might have some files from the dogs I treated," she replied. "Let me look." While Dr. Sinclair disappeared into her office, David carefully approached the mother dog. She watched him warily, but didn't move away. Slowly, he extended his hand, palm up. After a moment's hesitation, she pressed her nose into it. "Thank you," he whispered. The simple words seemed inadequate for what this animal had done. Her determination to save her puppy, her trust in him, despite every reason to fear humans, her extraordinary intelligence in leading him to help. Dr. Sinclair returned with a manila folder and a troubled expression. "Sheriff Thompson isn't answering. I left a message, but—" She hesitated. "He's usually very responsive." "Maybe he's busy with the storm," David suggested. "Maybe." She didn't sound convinced. "Here are the records I could find." David leafed through the folder. Most of it was standard veterinary documentation. Vaccination records, treatment notes, photos of injuries. But one page caught his attention, a newspaper clipping about the Black Mountain raid, with a photo of local officials standing outside the main kennel facility. He pointed to a figure standing slightly apart from the others. A tall man with a sheriff's badge. "Is that Thompson?" Dr. Sinclair nodded. "He was deputy then, got promoted about 3 years ago." David frowned, studying the photo more carefully. The deputy wasn't looking at the cameras like the others. He was staring off to the side, his expression troubled. Something about his posture suggested discomfort, as if he didn't want to be in the picture. "What do you know about him?" David asked. "Not much personally. He's efficient, well-liked. Moved here from somewhere back east about 8 years ago." She paused. "Why?" Before David could answer, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He had almost forgotten he had it. Out in the remote campsite, it had been useless without signal, but here in the clinic, it had reconnected to the network. A flood of delayed notifications lit up the screen. Most were meaningless, weather alerts, junk emails. But one text message from 3 hours ago made his blood run cold. Unknown number, stay away from the woods behind Riverside Trail. They're watching. "What is it?" Dr. Sinclair asked, noticing his expression. David showed her the message. "I don't recognize the number." "That's odd," she murmured. "Very odd." The puppy on the table let out a stronger cry, drawing their attention. Its color looked better, and it was moving more vigorously. "Good signs," Dr. Sinclair said, examining the tiny creature again. "Her body temperature is normalizing." As she spoke, the lights in the clinic flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The sudden darkness was absolute. Power outage from the storm, Dr. Sinclair said calmly. The generator should kick in. But seconds passed, and no generator hummed to life. Instead, David heard something that sent ice through his veins, the crunch of tires on gravel outside. The mother dog rose to her feet, a low growl building in her throat. Her eyes fixed on the clinic door, ears flattened against her skull. "Are you expecting anyone?" David whispered. "No," Dr. Sinclair replied, her voice tight. "No one comes this late." The beam of a flashlight swept across the front windows. Not one light, but several, moving with purpose. "Get the puppy," David said urgently. "Is there a back way out?" Dr. Sinclair quickly gathered the puppy, wrapping it in a small blanket. "Through the storage room, but my car's out front." "We can't risk it," David said, gathering his pack. The mother dog was already moving toward the back of the clinic, as if she understood perfectly what was happening. A heavy knock sounded at the front door, followed by a voice that made Dr. Sinclair freeze. "Eva, it's Sheriff Thompson. We got your message. Open up." Dr. Sinclair's eyes met David's in the darkness, a silent question passing between them. The mother dog's growl deepened, her body rigid with tension. "Something's not right," David whispered, barely audible. "Why would he bring multiple people, and why cut the power first?" Another knock, harder this time. "Dr. Sinclair, are you in there? We need to talk about your call." Dr. Sinclair hesitated, then made her decision. "This way," she mouthed, gesturing toward the back. They moved silently through the darkened clinic, the mother dog leading the way as if she could see perfectly in the blackness. David's injured ankle throbbed with each step, but adrenaline dulled the pain. The storage room was cramped, filled with medical supplies and stacked bags of dog food. A single window, small but unbarred, offered their only escape route. "It's too high," Dr. Sinclair whispered, cradling the puppy against her chest. David was already dragging a heavy metal shelf beneath the window. "I'll boost you up." The sound of breaking glass came from the front of the clinic. They were forcing their way in. "Hurry," David urged, cupping his hands to give Dr. Sinclair a foothold. She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you. The puppy is the priority." The mother dog paced anxiously, watching the door. With careful movements, Dr. Sinclair transferred the bundled puppy to a pocket inside her jacket, then stepped into David's hands. He lifted her with a stifled groan, his injured shoulder screaming in protest. She grabbed the window ledge, pushed it open, and hauled herself through. "Your turn," she whispered down. David turned to the mother dog. "Come on, girl, you first." But the dog ignored him, positioning herself between David and the storage room door, her stance unmistakable. She was prepared to defend. "No, don't." The door burst open. A flashlight beam blinded David momentarily. In the harsh light, he could make out two figures, one in a sheriff's uniform, the other a large man in civilian clothes. "Well now," said Sheriff Thompson, his voice unnervingly calm. "What do we have here?" The mother dog launched herself forward with a ferocious snarl. The civilian cursed, stumbling backward, but Thompson was ready. He swung something heavy, a baton or flashlight, catching the dog on the side of her head with a sickening thud. She crumpled, making a sound that tore through David's heart. "No!" he shouted, lurching forward. Thompson's flashlight found David's face. "You're that photographer," he said, recognition in his voice. "The one from the avalanche incident." David froze. How did he know that? "James," Thompson called over his shoulder, "we've got a problem here." The civilian stepped forward, rubbing his arm where the dog had nearly caught him. His face came into the light, middle-aged, with cold eyes, and an expensive watch glinting on his wrist. James Mercer, the supposedly missing owner of Black Mountain Kennels. "What's he doing here?" Mercer demanded. "Doesn't matter," Thompson replied coolly. "Where's Sinclair?" David said nothing, his eyes fixed on the mother dog. She was breathing, but motionless. "The window," the other man said suddenly, noticing the open escape route. "Someone went out." Thompson cursed. "Find her. She has the pup." Mercer disappeared from the room. Thompson kept his flashlight trained on David, his free hand resting on his holstered gun. "You had to stick your nose where it doesn't belong," Thompson said, his voice almost conversational. "Just like last time, huh? Taking pictures, asking questions." "You're working with him," David said, the pieces falling into place. You helped Black Mountain Kennels fake the shutdown. You've been protecting their operation all along." Thompson smiled thinly. "It's a profitable arrangement. You'd be surprised how much people will pay for the right dog, especially overseas buyers." Outside, a shout went up. "She's heading for the trees!" Thompson's attention wavered for a split second. It was all David needed. He lunged forward, grabbing a bag of dog food from the shelf and swinging it with all his strength. The heavy bag caught Thompson in the chest, sending him staggering backward. David followed through, tackling the sheriff against the doorframe. They crashed to the floor, Thompson's flashlight spinning away into darkness. They grappled in the blackness, each fighting for leverage. Despite his injuries, David fought with desperate strength. But Thompson was trained, powerful. His fist connected with David's jaw, stars exploding across his vision. "You're making this worse for yourself," Thompson growled, reaching for his weapon. A blur of motion interrupted them. The mother dog recovered enough to rejoin the fight. She clamped her jaws around Thompson's arm, eliciting a howl of pain. The gun clattered to the floor. David scrambled for it, his fingers closing around the cold metal just as Thompson kicked free of the dog. Without hesitation, David pointed the weapon at the sheriff. "Don't move," he ordered, his voice steadier than he felt. Thompson froze, blood dripping from his mangled arm. "You won't shoot a law enforcement officer," he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Try me," David replied. He wasn't sure if he could pull the trigger, but Thompson didn't need to know that. The mother dog positioned herself beside David, her fur bristling, a continuous growl rumbling from her throat. Blood matted the fur on the side of her head, but her eyes were clear, focused, intelligent. "Call your friend back," David demanded. Thompson hesitated, then raised his voice. "James, get back here!" Silence answered him. "Again," David insisted. "James!" Thompson shouted. After a moment, Mercer's voice came from outside. "What is it? I almost had her. Come back, now." David heard footsteps approaching. He tightened his grip on the gun. "When he comes in, both of you are going to sit down and stay quiet while I figure out what to do." Thompson's eyes narrowed. "You're in over your head, photographer. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," David replied. "Animal abusers, criminals, and you, a corrupt cop who betrayed every oath he ever took." Mercer appeared in the doorway, breathless. "I lost her in the—" He stopped short at the scene before him. "Inside," David ordered. "Hands where I can see them." Mercer complied, his expression calculating as he took in the situation. "This is a misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "We can work something out." "Save it," David snapped. "Sit down, both of you." As they reluctantly settled onto the floor, David noticed the mother dog staring intently at the doorway leading back to the main clinic. Her ears were pricked forward, her body tense but not aggressive. David risked a glance in that direction and saw why. Dr. Sinclair stood in the shadows, the puppy still safe in her jacket pocket, a phone held up in her other hand. "I got through to the state police," she said quietly. "They're sending units, and I recorded everything Thompson just said." Relief flooded through David, making his hands shake slightly. "How long?" 20 minutes, maybe less. There's a patrol car already in the area." Thompson and Mercer exchanged glances, a look that sent a warning through David. These men weren't going to surrender easily. "Watch them," he told Dr. Sinclair, passing her the gun. "I need to check something." With cautious movements, David limped to the front of the clinic, the mother dog following closely at his heels. The broken glass from the door crunched beneath his boots as he peered into the parking lot. Thompson's sheriff's cruiser sat beside Dr. Sinclair's sedan. But there was a third vehicle that made David's breath catch, a large black SUV with tinted windows and no license plates. "This isn't just some small-town corruption," he muttered. The mother dog whined softly in agreement, her intelligent eyes scanning the darkness outside. A noise from the back of the clinic sent David hurrying back, ignoring the pain shooting through his ankle. When he reached the storage room, he found Dr. Sinclair holding the gun with trembling hands, her face pale. Thompson and Mercer were still seated, but the atmosphere had changed. Tension crackled in the air. "What happened?" David asked. "Thompson's radio," Dr. Sinclair whispered. Someone called for him. As if on cue, the radio on Thompson's belt crackled to life again. "Unit 1, report status. We have the perimeter secured. Repeat, perimeter secured. David's blood ran cold. Perimeter? How many people do you have out there? Thompson's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Enough. This isn't just about illegal dog breeding, is it? David pressed, the pieces suddenly connecting in his mind. This is bigger. Mercer shifted uncomfortably, but Thompson maintained his calm facade. You really should have stayed in those mountains, photographer. Taking pictures of sunsets, minding your own business. The mother dog growled, sensing the escalating tension. The puppy in Dr. Sinclair's pocket had begun to whimper, as if it too understood the danger. We need to leave, David said urgently. Now, before their backup surrounds the building completely. Dr. Sinclair nodded, her professional composure returning. My car keys are in my desk drawer. They'll be watching the vehicles, David warned. There's a service road behind the clinic, she replied. It connects to the highway a mile east. If we can reach it without being seen. A new sound interrupted them, the low rumble of engines approaching. Not just one vehicle, but several. Through the small window, David could see headlights cutting through the rain, converging on the clinic from the main road. That's not state police, Dr. Sinclair said, her voice barely audible. It's too soon. David made a split-second decision. Tie them up, he instructed, grabbing veterinary gauze and tape from a nearby shelf. Quickly. As Dr. Sinclair held the gun steady, David secured Thompson and Mercer to heavy metal shelving units, ignoring their threats and protests. The mother dog watched the procedure with evident satisfaction, occasionally baring her teeth when either man moved too suddenly. The keys, David reminded her when they were finished. Dr. Sinclair hurried to retrieve them, returning moments later with not just her car keys, but also a small USB drive. Clinic security footage, she explained. It backs up to this every hour. It might have caught something useful. Outside, vehicle doors slammed. Flashlight beams swept the building's perimeter. The service road, David said. We need to go now. They slipped out through the back door, into the rain and darkness. The mother dog took the lead, her white-tipped tail visible even in the gloom. David's pack bounced against his injured shoulder as they moved away from the building, staying low and close to a line of evergreens that provided some cover. The service road was little more than a dirt track, deeply rutted and slick with mud. Dr. Sinclair's sedan would struggle, but it was their only option. There, she whispered, pointing to where her car was barely visible through the trees. They'd need to cross about 30 yards of open ground to reach it. David scanned the area. Multiple figures moved around the front of the clinic, their flashlights probing the darkness. Soon they'd discover Thompson and Mercer were missing. I'll create a distraction, David decided. Get to the car with the dogs. Be ready to drive the moment I reach you. What kind of distraction? Dr. Sinclair asked. David pulled out his phone. The kind that's hard to ignore. He opened his emergency app, the one with the piercing alarm designed to signal for help in remote locations. With a few taps, he set it to maximum volume, then prepared to throw it in the opposite direction from their escape route. When you hear it, go, he instructed. The mother dog nudged his hand suddenly, whining softly. She turned toward the tree line, her posture alert but not alarmed. David followed her gaze and felt a surge of hope. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, approaching fast along the main road. The state police had arrived sooner than expected. Change of plans, he whispered. We stay hidden. Let them handle this. But the mother dog had other ideas. She tugged insistently at David's sleeve, pulling him not toward the approaching police cars, but deeper into the forest. What is it, girl? He asked. Dr. Sinclair understood first. The other men out there, they'll scatter when they see the police. If they find that underground facility before we can show it to authorities, they'll destroy the evidence, David finished. And without proof, it's our word against a sheriff's. The dog tugged more urgently. David made another split-second decision. Go to the police, he told Dr. Sinclair. Show them the security footage, tell them everything. The puppy needs medical attention anyway. What about you? I'm going to make sure they can't cover this up. He patted his jacket pocket, where his camera still rested. I'm going to document everything. Dr. Sinclair looked torn, but the puppy's increasingly distressed cries made her decision clear. Be careful, she said, pressing the USB drive into his hand. There's a copy of the security footage on here too, just in case. David nodded, tucking it securely in his pocket. Go! As Dr. Sinclair made her way toward the approaching police lights, David turned to the mother dog. "Okay, girl, show me where we need to go." Without hesitation, she led him into the forest, moving with remarkable speed despite her injuries. Behind them, shouts erupted as the state police arrived at the clinic. Flashlight beams scattered in all directions as Mercer's men fled into the night. David followed the dog through the darkness, trusting her completely. She'd proven her intelligence too many times to doubt now. Whatever she was leading him toward, it was important. They traveled for nearly 20 minutes, the sounds of chaos at the clinic fading into the distance. The rain had finally stopped, but the forest floor remained treacherous with mud and hidden roots. David's injuries slowed him, but determination kept him moving. Finally, the dog stopped at the edge of a small clearing. In the center stood a cabin, its windows dark, a newer model truck parked outside. "What is this place?" David whispered. The mother dog growled low in her throat, her eyes fixed on the cabin. David understood immediately. This was connected to Black Mountain Kennels somehow. Perhaps their new base of operations. Or worse. David crouched in the underbrush, studying the cabin. Though modest in size, it was well maintained. Not the abandoned shack he might have expected for a clandestine operation. Solar panels glinted on the roof in the moonlight that now broke through the dissipating storm clouds. A satellite dish was mounted on one wall. Whoever used this place wanted modern comforts despite the remote location. The mother dog remained tense beside him, her hackles raised, a continuous low growl rumbling in her chest. "Someone's home," David whispered, noticing a faint blue light flickering through one of the curtained windows. A television or computer screen. He needed to get closer, to see what was happening inside, but caution was essential. If this was indeed connected to Black Mountain Kennels, whoever occupied the cabin could be just as dangerous as Thompson and Mercer. "Stay here," he told the dog, gently stroking her rain-soaked fur. To his surprise, she disobeyed, pressing against his leg as he began to move. Her message was clear. They were in this together. "All right," he conceded, but quietly. They circled the clearing, using the trees as cover. David's photographer's instincts took over as he assessed angles and approach options. Finally, he found what he was looking for. A side window partially obscured by overgrown bushes, offering both concealment and a view inside. As they crept closer, voices became audible from within. Two men, their tones urgent and angry. "Completely compromised," one was saying. 5 years of work, down the drain because Thompson couldn't handle one nosy vet. "The dogs are the priority," the second man replied. His voice was calmer, carrying the unmistakable authority of someone used to giving orders. "The merchandise can still be salvaged. Everything else is replaceable." David carefully parted the bushes for a better view. Inside, a surprisingly modern interior contrasted with the cabin's rustic exterior. State-of-the-art computers lined one wall. A large map marked with pins covered another. Two men stood in the center of the room, one pacing nervously, the other seated calmly at a desk strewn with papers. The seated man was older, distinguished-looking, with silver hair and an expensive watch that matched the one Mercer had been wearing. Something about his posture, his confidence, suggested he was the real authority, not Mercer, and certainly not Thompson. The mother dog's growl deepened at the sight of him. She recognized this man, and her reaction told David everything he needed to know about how she'd been treated. "Transfer the remaining inventory tonight," the older man instructed. "The Korean buyers are still interested, regardless of the complications. Triple the security at the new facility." David carefully extracted his camera from his jacket, removing the lens cap as silently as possible. He needed evidence, clear, undeniable proof of what was happening. The younger man stopped pacing. "What about the loose ends? The vet, the photographer?" The silver-haired man waved dismissively. "Thompson will handle the local authorities. As for the others..." He opened a drawer in his desk, removing a handgun. "Some problems require a personal touch." David's heart pounded as he snapped multiple photos, the camera thankfully silent in its professional mode. The mother dog pressed against him, trembling with either fear or rage. Perhaps both. The cabin door suddenly burst open and a third man stumbled in, breathless and panicked. "State police at the clinic! Thompson's been arrested!" The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The silver-haired man rose, his previous calm evaporating. "What happened?" The vet had evidence, security footage, recordings. And the dogs? They got away with one of the special breeding pairs. Which pair? The older man demanded, his voice dangerously soft. The alpha line, the blue-eyed shepherd husky cross. The mother dog flinched at these words, as if she understood she was the subject of their conversation. David placed a reassuring hand on her back, continuing to document everything. Salvage what you can from the underground facility, the older man ordered. Destroy the rest. We're implementing the contingency plan. The younger men moved with practiced efficiency, gathering laptops and files, shredding documents, wiping down surfaces. The silver-haired man opened a safe hidden behind a painting, removing stacks of cash and what looked like passports. "Sir," one of the men called, checking his phone. "There's activity at the old entrance. Someone's there." The leader's expression hardened. "Show me." They gathered around a computer showing security camera feeds. David couldn't see the screen from his position, but the men's reactions told him enough. "It's him, the photographer," one said. "And the dog? They must have followed the GPS trackers in the tags." GPS trackers. That explained how the mother dog had found her way back to her puppy after escaping. The realization struck David with force. She hadn't just been leading him to help by instinct or intelligence. She'd been following a signal, returning to the place where her baby was trapped. "They're heading for the control room," the silver-haired man observed. "Perfect. Trigger the secondary collapse sequence. Bury the evidence, and them with it." One of the younger men typed rapidly on a keyboard. "Sequence initiated, 3-minute countdown." David felt sick. They were talking about the cave system. They had it rigged to collapse completely. And someone was there, about to be buried alive. But who? The police? Dr. Sinclair? He desperately needed to warn them, but there was no way to do so without revealing his position. The mother dog made the decision for him. Without warning, she burst from the bushes with a ferocious bark, charging straight for the cabin's front door. "What the hell?" one of the men shouted as the dog's barking echoed through the night. David had no choice but to follow, camera clutched in one hand, his injured body protesting every movement. The element of surprise might be their only advantage. He reached the front door just as the mother dog crashed against it, her powerful body forcing it open. The men inside reacted with shouts of alarm, the silver-haired leader raising his gun. "Stop!" David yelled, holding up his camera. "Everything you've said is recorded. The police are on their way." It was a bluff. His camera could capture images but not audio at this distance. But in the chaos and confusion, the men hesitated. The mother dog didn't. She launched herself at the silver-haired man with single-minded fury, her teeth finding his gun arm. He screamed, the weapon discharging into the ceiling as they crashed to the floor. The other men scrambled for weapons, but David was already moving, swinging his heavy pack at the nearest one. The impact sent the man sprawling into a stack of equipment. "The sequence!" the silver-haired man shouted through his pain. "Complete the sequence!" David spotted the computer with the countdown timer, now reading less than 2 minutes. He lunged for it, but the third man intercepted him, tackling him to the ground. Pain exploded through his injured shoulder as they grappled. The man was younger, stronger, and uninjured. David felt himself losing the fight, his grip on consciousness slipping. A blur of motion saved him. The mother dog, finished with the leader, redirected her attack to David's assailant. Her teeth sank into the man's leg, dragging him off with surprising strength. David scrambled to his feet, staggering to the computer. The countdown showed 1 minute remaining. His fingers flew over the keyboard, searching desperately for a way to stop the sequence. Behind him, chaos reigned. The mother dog fought like a creature possessed, keeping the men at bay through sheer ferocity. But she couldn't hold them forever. The screen offered no obvious way to abort the countdown. In desperation, David grabbed the computer itself, ripping cables from the wall. The screen flickered, but the countdown continued. "You can't stop it," the silver-haired man laughed through bloodied teeth. "It's on a separate system. Redundancies within redundancies." 50 seconds. David changed tactics. If he couldn't stop the collapse, he needed to warn whoever was in danger. He located a microphone connected to the security system and pressed the transmit button. "This is David Brooks. If anyone can hear me, get out now. The cave is rigged to collapse in 40 seconds. The silver-haired man lunged for David, his face contorted with rage. "You fool! Do you have any idea what you've done?" David barely evaded his grasp, the warning now broadcast throughout the cave system. 30 seconds remained on the countdown. The mother dog intercepted the leader again, her jaws clamping around his ankle, but one of the other men managed to grab a chair, swinging it toward her with brutal force. "No!" David shouted, throwing himself between the dog and the incoming blow. The chair caught him across the back, sending him sprawling across the floor. Pain exploded through his already battered body, but he'd succeeded in protecting the dog who had saved him so many times already. 20 seconds. The mother dog dragged herself to David's side, her breathing labored, but her eyes still fierce with determination. Together, they backed toward the door as the three men advanced on them. "You can still walk away from this," the silver-haired man offered, his voice smooth despite the blood streaming from his arm. "We have connections overseas, money. We can make you disappear somewhere comfortable." "Like you did with the other witnesses," David countered, buying time as he searched for an escape route. "How many people have you buried to protect your operation?" The leader's smile turned cold. "Business is business, nothing personal." 10 seconds. A sudden commotion outside drew everyone's attention. Flashlight beams swept across the windows, and a commanding voice called through a megaphone, "This is the state police! We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands up." The momentary distraction was all David needed. He grabbed a nearby laptop and hurled it at the main power junction box on the wall. Sparks erupted as the cabin plunged into darkness. In the confusion, David and the mother dog bolted for the door, bursting outside into a scene of organized chaos. Police vehicles surrounded the clearing, officers crouched behind them, with weapons drawn. Among them stood Dr. Sinclair, the puppy still secure in her jacket. "Get down!" an officer shouted as David and the dog emerged. They didn't need to be told twice. They dove to the ground just as gunfire erupted from inside the cabin. The police returned fire, the exchange brief but intense. "The cave system!" David shouted to the nearest officer. "It's rigged to collapse. There might be people inside." The countdown in his head reached 0. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a deep, ominous rumble rose from the earth, shaking the ground beneath them. In the distance, a plume of dust rose above the trees as sections of the forest floor caved in. "No," David breathed, imagining anyone trapped in that nightmare. But the mother dog whined softly, pressing against him in what felt strangely like reassurance. The gunfire from the cabin ceased. After tense moments of silence, the silver-haired man's voice called out, "We're coming out! Don't shoot!" One by one, the three men emerged, hands raised. The leader's calm demeanor had vanished, replaced by cold fury as officers swarmed forward to handcuff them. Dr. Sinclair rushed to David's side, medical bag in hand. "Are you all right? You look terrible." "I've had better days," David admitted, wincing as she examined his fresh injuries. "The puppy?" In answer, she opened her jacket slightly, revealing the tiny creature, now awake and alert, its blue eyes blinking in the harsh police lights. The mother dog whined with joy, nosing gently at her baby. Dr. Sinclair carefully placed the puppy on the ground, allowing the reunion. The scene was so tender, so pure against the backdrop of violence and cruelty, that several of the hardened police officers paused to watch. "We found evidence at the clinic," Dr. Sinclair explained quietly. Breeding records, financial documents Thompson had hidden. When the state police arrived, they knew immediately this was bigger than just animal abuse. A tall officer approached them, his expression grim but respectful. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Lieutenant Reynolds, State Police Special Investigations. We need your statement, but first, thank you. We've been trying to build a case against these people for years." "What exactly were they doing?" David asked, though he had already pieced much of it together. "Black Mountain Kennels was a front," Reynolds explained. "Yes, they ran an illegal breeding operation, but it was just one part of a larger enterprise. They were using the dogs as drug mules for international shipments, surgical implants in the special breeding pairs. The blue-eyed shepherd mixes were particularly valuable because they could pass through customs with wealthy owners who had no idea what they were really carrying." David looked at the mother dog with new understanding. Her escape hadn't just been about freedom or saving her puppy. It had been a desperate flight from her unspeakable abuse. "What about the cave collapse?" he asked. "Was anyone inside?" "We had teams approaching the facility from multiple access points," Reynolds said. "But your warning came through in time. Everyone got out." Relief flooded through David. No more lives lost, no more blood on his hands. The silver-haired man was being led to a police vehicle when he locked eyes with David. "You have no idea what you've done," he called out. "This goes higher than you can imagine. People will come looking." An officer pushed his head down into the car, cutting off his threat. "Is he right?" David asked Reynolds. "Are there others involved?" The lieutenant's expression was unreadable. "We'll find out. The investigation is just beginning." As the police vehicles began to depart, David sank to the ground beside the mother dog and her puppy. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him shaking with exhaustion and pain. Yet, watching the mother tenderly grooming her baby, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time: peace, purpose. Dr. Sinclair sat beside him. "They'll need a home," she said quietly. "Somewhere safe, where they can heal." David looked at the mother dog, this extraordinary creature who had trusted him, saved him, led him into darkness and back to light. She met his gaze with those intelligent blue eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. "I think," he said slowly, "they might already have found one." The mother dog rested her head on his knee, her puppy curled against her side. In that moment, David knew his self-imposed exile was over. The mountains would still be there, but he wouldn't be facing them alone anymore. 3 weeks later, David stood on the porch of his mountain cabin, camera in hand. The early morning light bathed the landscape in a golden glow, transforming the rugged terrain into something almost magical. He clicked the shutter, capturing the moment with practiced precision. A soft whine behind him made him turn. Luna, as he'd named the mother dog, stood in the doorway, her intelligent blue eyes watching him intently. The wound on her head had healed, leaving only a small scar partially hidden by fur. At her feet, little Echo tumbled about, her puppy energy seemingly inexhaustible. "Coming, girl," David said, smiling as Luna nudged his hand with her nose, her way of telling him it was breakfast time. Inside the cabin, Dr. Sinclair, Eva, as he now called her, was already up, coffee brewing on the stove. She'd been staying with them since that night, helping nurse both dogs back to health. What had begun as professional concern had evolved into something neither of them had expected. "The reporter will be here at noon," she reminded him, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" David nodded, watching as Echo attacked a loose shoelace with fierce determination. People need to know what happened, all of it. The case against Black Mountain Kennels had exploded into one of the largest animal trafficking and drug smuggling busts in state history. The silver-haired man, identified as Richard Harding, a businessman with international connections, had been the operation's mastermind, using Thompson and Mercer as his local operators. The network extended across 3 states and had connections to smuggling rings in Asia and Europe. David's photographs from that night, combined with Eva's security footage and the evidence recovered from the cabin, had proven instrumental in building the case. Lieutenant Reynolds had called yesterday to inform them that 3 more arrests had been made, including a customs official who had been on Harding's payroll. "What will you tell her about them?" Eva asked, nodding toward Luna and Echo. David smiled, watching as Luna gently corrected her rambunctious puppy with a soft nudge. "The truth, that they saved me in more ways than one." After breakfast, David took Luna and Echo for their morning walk. Luna's limp had improved significantly, though she still favored her right front paw when tired. Echo bounded ahead, discovering the world with endless enthusiasm, while Luna remained vigilant, never straying far from either David or her puppy. The path led them to a small clearing overlooking the valley. David sat on a fallen log, allowing the dogs to explore. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Reynolds with an update on the case. Harding was talking, offering information on his overseas contacts in exchange for considerations at sentencing. "Too little, too late," David muttered, pocketing the phone. Luna appeared beside him, resting her head on his knee. Those intelligent eyes seemed to see straight into his soul, understanding him in ways no human ever had. "You knew, didn't you?" he said softly, stroking her head. "That night in the forest. You knew exactly who I was and what I needed." She'd found him at his lowest point, when he'd cut himself off from the world, buried under guilt for the lives he believed he could have saved during the avalanche. In saving her puppy, in exposing the cruelty of Black Mountain Kennels, he'd found redemption he hadn't known he was seeking. Back at the cabin, Eva was setting up for the interview, clearing space in the living room. The reporter, from a major national outlet, had been pursuing the story relentlessly, fascinated by the elements that had captured public imagination. The heroic dog, the reclusive photographer, the corrupt sheriff, the underground breeding operation. "Your photos from the cave are on today's front page," Eva said, showing him her tablet. The images were haunting. The restraints, the cages, the record books documenting years of abuse. "They're calling for a congressional investigation into animal trafficking networks." David nodded, satisfaction warming his chest. The truth was out. Impossible to bury or ignore. At precisely noon, a car pulled up outside. The reporter was a serious-looking woman with keen eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She set up her equipment efficiently, then sat across from David, Luna immediately positioning herself between them. "Protective, isn't she?" the reporter observed. "She has good reason to be," David replied. The interview began with standard questions about how he discovered the operation, his escape from the cave, the confrontation at the cabin. David answered honestly, downplaying his own role and emphasizing Luna's extraordinary intelligence and courage. "Some are calling your photos the most significant animal welfare evidence in decades," the reporter noted. "How does that feel after what happened with the avalanche coverage?" David tensed slightly. Of course she would bring that up. Eva reached over, her hand finding his in silent support. "The avalanche wasn't what people think," he said carefully. "I was documenting the aftermath, not exploiting tragedy. But this," he gestured to the published photos, "this is about exposing genuine cruelty, operations that thrive in darkness. If my images help end that, then my camera has finally served its true purpose." The reporter nodded, seemingly satisfied. "And the dogs? What happens to them now?" Echo chose that moment to tumble into the room, pouncing playfully on her mother's tail. Luna responded with patient tolerance, her eyes never leaving David. "They stay with me," he said simply. "We saved each other." After the reporter left, promising the story would run next Sunday, David, Eva, and the dogs hiked to their favorite spot overlooking the valley. The afternoon sun was warm, the air crisp with autumn's approach. "What now?" Eva asked as they watched Echo chase leaves in the breeze. David considered the question. For so long, he'd existed in a limbo of his own making, hiding from the world and its judgments. Now, with Luna and Echo beside him, and Eva's hand in his, the future held possibilities he'd thought forever closed to him. "Now," he said, lifting his camera to capture Echo's joyful play, "we live." Luna pressed against his side, her warmth a constant reminder of the unbreakable bond they had forged in darkness and danger. She lifted her muzzle, blue eyes meeting his with that uncanny intelligence that still amazed him daily. In those eyes, he saw not just trust or affection, but something deeper, recognition between two souls who had found each other when they needed it most. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, David knew with absolute certainty that while his journey with Luna had begun with her cry for help, their story, their real story, was just beginning.